Hello, I'm Sarah Burns with the Salt Lake Local Real Estate Team, coming to you today to give you another housing update for 2021. Today is December 15th, 2020. So in this podcast, we're going to look at what has been going on in the housing market for the last few months in Utah. We're also going to look at some things on a national scale, and we're going to evaluate the pre-recession market of 2008 and how we dealt with that recession. And then we're going to wrap it up by giving you a small update on what we're expecting for the 2021 housing market. So over the last few months, housing prices have surged nationally. And what that's looked like in Utah is we've gone from a medium home price in 2019 of $349K to $385K. So an 11.2% increase. Nationally, there's been an 11% increase. If we're looking at the average home sale price in Utah, we've gone from $396K to $452K, a 14.3% increase. Interest rates are very low in the 2%, and we have a deficiency of inventory at 39% deficient. Okay, now what's driven this is low interest rates, low inventory rates, and unforeseen changes in the labor markets, okay, wherein we've got a lot of people that are now working from home, and their belief is that they will continue to work from home into the foreseeable future, okay? So that's resulted in lots of people moving from the cities into more suburban areas, into larger homes. So interest rates and low inventory, okay, and even what's happened with the labor markets, they are not solely what's responsible for our market today. Okay, in order to understand our market, we need to go back to pre-recession 2008. During that time, we had mass inventory on the market in both existing and new construction. We also had faulty and unsustainable lending practices. So we had banks that were taking C and D borrowers and lending to them as if they were A and B borrowers. Now, this really stimulated the housing market, and there was really a frenzy. In addition to this, we also had a lot of flipping of properties going on. Flipping is a term used in the industry, which means to resell. Okay, this was going on with both small investors, people like you and I, who might purchase a property, rehab it, and resell it for a profit. But it was also going on with developers and builders. And developers and builders and their investors, they didn't always bring value to a property. Okay, bringing value might look like entitling a property through the city, so it's through the planning commission, or it might look like putting utilities into the subdivision. That often didn't happen. Frequently, what occurred instead is that land was purchased. It may have been held for 2 or 3 months, and then it was flipped for a profit. Now, this drove up the prices for the end user, people like you and I, the person that purchases the home that is built on that property. And these practices ended up to be quite unsustainable, leading to the recession. So what happened in the recession? How was that dealt with? One thing that happened is that the mass inventory on the market opened up opportunity for portfolio investors. Okay, now portfolio investors are people like Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, Graystar. They are publicly traded companies on Wall Street with lots of clout, lots of power, lots of money. The other thing that occurred is that interest rates were historically low. They were dropped into the 2 and 3%. I've spoken with homeowners that have told me that they had loans in the 1% even. And this was done in effort to try to stimulate the economy. But instead of people putting their homes on the market and reselling them and buying new properties, they just refinanced. So that withdrew a lot of inventory off the market, just like the portfolio companies were withdrawing inventory from the market. Okay, the third thing that happened is that builders and developers they went bankrupt. That withdrew new construction properties off the market. So over time, there's an eroding of inventory that's taking place, eroding. And once you hit rock bottom, as far as real estate prices, there's only one place to go, and that's up. And that's what happened. So how is today's market aligned with the pre-recession market and what occurred in the recession? And you might say to yourself, well, Sarah, they're not aligned. They're two radically different markets. We had mass inventory then, we have a deficiency of inventory now, okay? But that's a really reductive view of the health of markets. And what we see when we analyze the pre-recession market and we analyze our market today is that whether we are dealing with deficiency of inventory or mass inventory, that there can be inflation in housing prices either way. And that's because there's all kinds of peripheral factors that influence the nature of economy and the housing market. So how the two markets are aligned is the flipping of properties that initially was owned by small investors and state developers and builders. That has been largely hijacked by these portfolio companies. Now, to give you an idea of how big these companies are, if you go to Greystar's website, they tout themselves as having 693,000 units, owning 2,500 communities, 28 billion in assets, 17.5 billion in sponsorships. They are a global player in renting and purchasing in existing and in new construction. Okay, and that's one thing that we should be aware of is in the new construction markets now, they're going and they're purchasing land and they're building single family homes. Okay, and so this creates monopolies on the market, which allows those companies to fix the price of housing. Because of this, the Federal Trade Commission is currently in a lawsuit seeking to try to curb some of this, as it seems like they feel like maybe home ownership is something that's been hijacked by investors instead of the common man that needs housing. Okay, so that's the first thing, the first way in which it's aligned. The second way is in terms of lending. We don't have the kind of lending going on where C&D borrowers are being lent to as if they are A and B borrowers, okay? But we've got other problems. Decades back, it was determined that housing should not comprise more than 20% of a household's income. That number has substantially increased over the decades. And the reason for it is because housing prices have inflated so much that in order for borrowers to be able to afford a home, it's been determined that they can spend more of their income on housing. Okay, so if you're looking at FHA borrowers, an FHA borrower might put 3.5% down, but it may be that their payment comprises 56% of their income. In looking at urban studies and sustainability, the data reflects that it's not sustainable in any way, and that the less down you have and the more you're spending on your housing, the higher likelihood you will enter foreclosure. So debt to income, number one, that is the single biggest problem that we've got with housing sustainability at this time. But there's some other things going on as well, okay? And one of those things is that many people are paying grossly over what the appraisal price is on their home. Now, lenders only lend the appraisal. They don't lend over that, okay? So if a buyer is paying over, what happens? Well, there's a few things that happen. One, that buyer's savings is diminished. Two, their equity is diminished. That money that they're paying over their appraisal could go into their equity, okay, which is great for the economy, but that's not happening. The third thing that happens is it contributes to future inflation, because if you're someone that's put $25,000 to $50,000 over your appraisal price on your home, when you go to resell it, you're not just going to let that amount go, you're going to expect to have it back. The third thing that's happening in the lending markets is something called appraisal waivers. Now, in speaking with my lending partner, Ashley Seipert, she says she is really not seeing a lot of this except for in refinancing and cash out refinances. But in speaking with a couple of other lenders, they're stating that they're seeing appraisal waivers on 20 to 25% of their standard home purchases. Now, what are appraisal waivers? Appraisal waivers, in essence, it's AI determining the value of your home. Okay, now AI doesn't have eyes, so it can't see if the comparable properties that it's utilizing to determine the value of your home, if those properties have had a gut job and been fully remodeled, or if the lot was more functional, or if the lot had an east-facing view with a beautiful spanning mountain view. These things increase the value of a property. AI can't see if the subject property has those features. And so the value that it assigns to the home may be an arbitrary figure. And this can be a problem when a homeowner goes to resell their property, because the property may not actually be worth what the AI has determined it is. So let's look at other peripheral factors of the market that existed prior to 2008. Right now, we've got a rental moratorium, okay, and a mortgage moratorium. That ends December 31st. And today is December 15th. It might be that there's some kind of federal aid extended, but as of now, there's nothing on the agenda. Okay, so those rental payments, whether it's for renters or mortgagees who have deferred their payments, they become due January 1st. And if they are not made, then the bank is in trouble, okay? Or if you're, say that you're an owner landlord and your renter can't make the payment to you, and you in turn can't make the payment to your bank, when millions of people are in this situation, that puts the banks in jeopardy. We've got something similar with local businesses, okay? Local businesses are struggling with overhead and their own commercial payments, ergo potentially putting the banks in jeopardy. This also, what's going on in the rental markets, in the investment rental markets, and in the local business markets influences taxes, okay? There's going to be a bigger deficiency of taxes, local business accounts on a state level for about 25%. So the impact can be pretty big. We also have to look at that we've got deflation in interest rates and inflation in goods and services, just like we did pre-recession 2008. And this affects borrowers' savings. It affects everybody's savings. Let's not even just say borrowers, because there's lots of people that are just renting, but it's affecting savings, and by decreasing savings, and credit card debt is rising. When we look at the unemployment rate, that still has not balanced. Pew Research states that of people who have returned to work, that 60% of them are making less than they were before. We've also got AI and robotics that are taking over a lot of jobs. There's an interesting article. If you Google Amazon and robotics, you can read about that. It's going on with Amazon, but it's going on with many other companies as well. So how are these things going on in the labor markets going to affect the housing market and all these other peripheral factors that we've spoken about? The National Association of Realtors and the Utah Association of Realtors gain data from about 23 economists. And what we're seeing in 2021 is that housing sales are increasing by a lot. And if housing sales are increasing, we have to assume that there's a lot of inventory that's coming on the market that has not been on the market before, because we've been very, very deficient. So that's the only thing that could prompt the jump that is expected to take place in 2021. Now, we do have some new construction product, quite a bit more that's also going to come on the market, but it's fractional in comparison to the existing. So this would lead us to believe that what has happened with the pandemic and people, losing income, losing jobs, that it's going to result in increased inventory. How is this going to affect prices? The data is suggesting that it will impact prices, but it doesn't appear to be like what we saw in 2008 and 2009. It looks like we're going from about an 8% increase in housing prices from 2019 to lowering to about a 5% increase. It's still an increase instead of negative. But the question is, all these peripheral factors, how will they affect the market in the long term? And we will have more information for you after January 8th, which is the date that the data for specifically for Utah, for the Utah market, is released. So between January 15th and January 30th, you will receive your next housing forecast for 2021. If you have questions in the meantime about the market, or whether you should be purchasing or selling, when you should be looking at that, give us a call. I'm Sarah Burns with the Salt Lake Local Real Estate Team with the Berkshire Hathaway office in Cottonwood Heights. Thanks for joining.